All right. Hi, everyone. How's everyone doing today? Excited to learn some React?
Always.
Always? Cool. So just a quick recap of where we were. So last week, we spent some time building out the Backend API. We split up our API into two different servers. So now we have a front-end server and a backend server. So the front end is just loading the client-side stuff, and the backend is, it's got the API. And then we added a way to talk to Yelp. We have this route called Yelp/search, which allows us to search for restaurants. We did some algorithm stuff where we came up with a cool function to create a query parameters. And then we essentially created this file, Yelp API, which has a function called search, which is called when you want to make a call to search for restaurants. So we sort of abstracted away some of the internal details of how Yelp API works. And we just sort of creating this nice function here, which just takes in information about what we need and doesn't really need information about how to do it. Like that stuff has just been abstracted away. Right. So, for example, like the API itself, the authorization token, and all of that stuff is just sort of like hidden away from us. So, from the standpoint of using this, I only have to give it like the parameters, and it just like does it for us. So, in the future, when we want to add like more functions to this API, let's say we want to, I don't know, what are the other things you can do with the Yelp API? Like find other things. We could just modify that file, and we would just have to focus on giving it the input that it needs to do the search. Like we don't have to worry about like the API key and the URL and stuff like that.
Like we would just add the methods.
Mm-hmm. So you would just modify and add a method to this file. So let's say there was a function called like top restaurants or something. So you would do all of the work in here, which would actually make the call. And then from here, you would just say Yelp API.top restaurants. So you do the painful work of like, making the actual call and writing it once. And because you've written it down, other people can like, just reuse it. So in the future, potentially, you can just make this a library too, an open source Yelp library. You remember we saw this package called Node Yelp a while ago, where we were like trying to use that, and we ended up not using it. But this is essentially the Yelp Node library, like a condensed form of it, because this is very generic, right? Like all this is taking a unique API key, blah blah blah. So yeah, you can make this an open source library if you want. Okay, so let's like look at the UI to see where we're at. So I've started both the front end server and the back end server. Let me just restart it. So npm run start client and npm run start server. Is everybody following along? Because I've pushed the code. So if you want, you can just clone it and follow along if you want to do that. Cool. So if I go to localhost 8080, I see my front end. And then if I go to localhost 3000, I essentially have something running. It doesn't have any routes other than this one. Oh, I forget what it's called. Yelp/search. Cool. Request failed with status code 400 because we didn't provide it like any search parameters. Right? We need to give it like location, was it? Yeah, location. So location equal to Oakland. Cool. So we get some stuff back. I should install the JSON view plugin.
Yeah. Make it pretty.
Oh, I see. It's in my Learners Guild profile, not in my, but cool. Okay, why didn't you do it? Do it. Format. Why doesn't it work? So weird. Okay.
There's one just called JSON formatter that I use.
JSON formatter. This one? Okay, I'm just going to remove. Okay.
How to start the server?
npm run start server. Okay, never mind. It's fine. We can look at it from the backend. Okay, so what do we want to do next? So we have a way of searching for restaurants. We have a way of looking at a particular, we've created like some components here which have some mock data, right? So we have our app component. Our app component is rendering a restaurant, and it has some restaurant select buttons. And remember, we came up with, I think this is something that we did towards the end of the last thing, where we came up with some state for our app. We were like, these are the things that we need. We need a way to track our rejected restaurants. We need a way to track our accepted restaurants. We need a current restaurant, and we need restaurants from search. Right. So the first thing we have built the way of searching for restaurants. So the logical next thing to do is to essentially populate this when the component mounts. Okay, so let's try that. So component did mount. So a good place to make API calls in this function. So we want to make a call to our backend to fetch restaurants for a specific with some specific parameters. So we're going to use Axios on the front end as well. Yes, do we have Axios? I guess we do. So one more thing that I wanted to do. Okay, let's just start with that first. So let's say import from Axios, and we're going to say axios.get. Yeah.
In the past too, I passed it like a routed path, like /Yelp, or everything past the local host 3000. Because if you hard code it like this, and then later on you decide to like host it somewhere else,
yeah,
this is gonna.
Yeah, we're gonna change it later.
Okay.
Cool. Thank you for that. Because it's running on a different port, right? So for just to make it work now, we're gonna.
Yeah, if you just do like /Yelp /search, it'll append it to whatever port, like wherever the URL is that you're already on.
Right, but we are on a different. We are on 8080. We need to go to 3000. It's running on a different port.
Okay.
Yeah. So eventually, we want to put this in some sort of a config. We can add it to here. Add a config for URL. So this essentially becomes our base URL. And then based on where we are, if you're in production, it wouldn't be localhost 3000, it would be whatever your production URL is. Okay, so when we are searching, we want to like give it some location. So it's interesting. So like now we have this function that we created on the server side, right, which was this make query, but looks like that could be used even on the front end. So usually what is a good thing to do is to create another folder here called common for reusable stuff on the front end and the back end. And I'm going to create a file inside of common called utils.js. And then here, I'm going to move this make query function. Oops. And then I'm going to say, I'd rather just export for now. So I'm going to export this function, and then I'll have to import this function. Are we not using ES6 here? Okay.
No, we were using ES5.
Oh.
Yeah, you were using ES5 because this is the server side, so otherwise you'd have to run that way to create like a disk build.
Right. That is true. Okay, so we can't really use the common then, because it would be, I guess we can just make it ES5, in the common folder could be ES5. So this could just be function, and then we could say so we use modular exports instead of export. Okay, so going back here, you're gonna have to import it. So const make query equal to require. So we are inside of server. We go one level up, and we go to common. We go to utils. So now we have access to a make query inside of our server. We want to do the same thing inside of our components too. So here, I'm going to say import so one level top, same thing, common / utils. Yeah.
Go back to the Backend API.
Sure. So we just added this line here.
Can you after this, can you go to the utils file, please?
Sure.
Good.
So utils looks like this.
And again, what is the utils doing? Is it putting together the query?
So I'm just like moving like shared functions into this file.
Okay.
Just so that, I don't have to rewrite this function inside of my front end too.
Okay.
That's why I put it inside this folder called common. It usually indicates that something that's just shared across the front end and back end.
Yeah. Is this really like a reusable component, or is it just a shared?
This is just like a utility function, shared utility function. Yeah. Sabine, how are you doing? Okay. So we're gonna go back to app.js, which is our root component, and we're gonna like now make some fake queries. So we're gonna say let params equal to location is Oakland. Instead of rating. I guess we didn't really have it. Let's just say location is Oakland. And then we're gonna say we're gonna do backticks here. Actually, let's call this query string. We're going to say a query string is make query of our params. And then here, we're going to say this is query string. Right, so what we did is we essentially required this function make query up top. We just like passing in some fake data into that function, and that's going to give us a query string which we're going to use to make a call to Yelp. Or rather, we're going to use to make a call to a backend, which is eventually going to make a call to Yelp. So it's kind of like a proxy to Yelp. Okay, so here this is going to be a promise. So we want to do some stuff. So let's just log it for now. So we're going to say then we get some sort of response. This is console.log.
You need to return it on 33?
Not really, not for now, because we're just like console logging it for now. So it just happens at some point in the future. Like if you were doing something like let a equal to this, never mind actually.
Can you go back to utils for
Yeah.
just 30 seconds?
Oops. So this isn't a new function. I just moved the function from the other file to into this file.
What file?
That was in Yelp API. In Yelp API, there should be a function called make query. I just copy pasted it. So yeah, you shouldn't be typing it out.
Can I delete it from the Yelp API?
Sure. I mean, if you've copied it correctly.
Thank you.
Cool. Any questions so far about what we're doing? Okay, so what would happen now? What do you think should happen?
Throw an error.
It's a good possibility.
Is all we need is the location for our query?
Yeah, we probably may need more things, but for now we're just like trying to get something to work.
Okay.
So what's gonna happen when I refresh my front end?
It'll render the same
Because it's
and then just log
Uh-huh.
the console like with the response from that.
Okay. So it's gonna make a request to this route and then it's gonna log the response. Okay, let's see. Open the developer tab. Cannot find module. All right, so it's 2 levels down, not 1 level down. So we are inside components, which is inside client. So this would be 2 levels down. So you're right, we did get an error. Okay, so that compiled. Did everyone see that thing? We had to fix this import path. Okay. So we're getting a CORS error with our backend. So essentially, Axios,
Oh, is this a course issue?
possibly, but I'm gonna try something different. So let's see. So let's say we change this to fetch, and then I can say method is no CORS. Let's see if this does something different. Set the requests mode to no cars. That's what I did. Oh, mode, not method. Okay, cool. So maybe I haven't used Axios that much. Maybe Patrick knows. Patrick, do you know how to disable CORS in Axios?
I haven't had to do it, so.
Okay,
Sorry.
that's fine. Fine, let's just use fetch for now because it's a simple get request. So I just replaced Axios.get with fetch.
Excuse me, did you change anything else in the Yelp API .js?
Yes, I had to import this function because now it's no longer in this file.
Mine is saying on line 8, it's saying make query is not a function.
Right, because you have to import it from this other file now because you've moved the function.
Right, I did.
And then did you export it in the file? You have to do a module.exports.
Nope, thank you.
Cool. Yeah, it's always tricky. Sometimes you forget to export it and then it's like, where is the function? Q. So are folks getting this response log? Is that happening? Yeah, because I think we haven't.
Yes.
We have to like JSONify our response. So we have to say response.json. That'll convert our response to a JSON thing, and then we get back some JSON, and then let's console log JSON with JSON.
Right, this fetch makes you do that extra step.
Mm-hmm. So you have to explicitly deserialize your response body, and since that takes some time, it's implemented in a promise. So you kind of have to do a then and then do another then to actually get the response back.
Ever seen this mode? The object with mode,
Mm-hmm.
no cores.
Yeah. So this is when you're making a request from one URL to another, like from one domain to another domain, essentially. And then, but the browser by default disables all those requests unless this is explicitly set. The new security feature on the Fetch API. Okay, so if you refresh our page, cool, we're getting some error, but everyone at this point? And everyone getting the same error? Okay, so when we look at our network tab, let's refresh again. So our search query, we got back some stuff. And our response headers, Does not have a content type as JSON in here. So that's interesting. Right, do you see that? We don't have any content type header. So probably on our back end in our index, but we are sending back response at JSON. Interesting.
You need to set it when you send the fetch request.
Oh, like the content type of our GET request. But there's no content in our GET request, right? It's just query parameters. Okay, so what is the error that we're doing? Unexpected end of input. So when we are calling does anyone know what's going on?
It's why we're here to meet.
I still have the no access.
Of course.
So did you set the mode to no cars here? We
Yeah.
passed in an additional.
Oh, you're still doing Axios? Try doing a fetch.
I do fetch get or do I have to
Just fetch.
Yeah.
All
All right, so let's comment this out and see.
And
So
did you
headers.
change your response to response.json?
Okay, so let's try this. I'm going to explicitly make a fetch call from here.
Yeah, hold on a sec.
Right, I'm looking at-
That's okay. Just a second. This is where it's the errors. It's right in there. There's something.
Oh, and then maybe this was in response.json.
So I'm explicitly just making a call from the command line here.
Browser.
Yeah. So I guess what we're getting back is not JSON, which is why
Oh, that's-
this is not being parsed as JSON. Let's see. So going back to our index, we are just essentially sending back results.
Is that other console error maybe? Is that
Which one?
the console error unexpected?
Yeah. So this is how I'm reading this error is that we're trying to deserialize our response as JSON, and it seems to not be JSON, and it's throwing an error.
Okay. It's expecting JSON.
Right, because we're calling r.json here. So that essentially takes the body of the response and like tries to parse it as JSON, but it doesn't seem to be JSON. So that's what is the error. So let's see our results. So our results essentially has an object, top level object called data. So maybe we can say results.data. Okay, so that gave me back so that is
Maybe you have to
so it's already a JavaScript object. So content type. Okay, so we are getting back application JSON. So why is it not able to parse it as JSON? So let's see. Let's look at the fetch API JSON. So we get the response and we call response.json, and then we just get the JSON. To extract the JSON body content from the response, we use the JSON method defined on the body. Okay, that's what we're doing, right?
Maybe because you return that console log in brackets.
This one? Yeah, so this is just like doing, so
Oh, it's not. Never mind.
So even if I don't have this, I'm sure we're gonna get that. So let's see, dot catch error. Why?
Is
So-
our
So does anyone have a JSON viewer thing working on the browser? So what happens if you directly make this request here? Does it format it as JSON? Wow, that is so weird.
Maybe you need to like quit and restart Chrome.
Okay, got it. So it is JSON. I'm not tripping.
It's odd too for me because I'm still using Axios online,
Uh-huh.
getting a response.
Uh-huh.
But I can use Axios because like I have my server running on Node and not Webpack server, so I can still do like a request to the same local host to the
Got
same
it.
URL, and then Axios is able to work with no problem.
So let's see, Axios, no CORS. I guess we can also just add like our header to our backend for now to make it work. The request, the CORS headers, but that would be a hack.
I googled the error message
Me too.
with fetch. I found a Stack Overflow answer that was interesting.
What about the opaque?
Yeah, the opaque.
Yeah.
That was what it like was console logged as before we put .json on,
Uh-huh.
and it says opaque types are listed as severely restricted.
Okay.
Um,
And so what is
they
the,
cannot currently be read when type is opaque.
Yeah, it says URL list is the empty list. Status is 0. This message is
so why is it opaque?
body is null and trailer is empty.
It says, yeah, a response for no CORS request. Request for resource response.
Fetch response opaque.
So Google has documentation on opaques too. It says when we make a fetch request, the response will be given a response.type of basic, CORS, or opaque. These types indicate where the resources come from and can be used to inform how we should treat the response object. No CORS is intended to make requests to other origins that do not have CORS headers. That's what you said. And result in an opaque response. But as stated, this isn't possible in the window global scope at the moment.
But I'm so, how is Alex using your code and it's working?
Oh, it's not working.
Oh, I thought it was working.
No, it's working for me, but I'm still using Axios, so I'm not using Fetch, and I set up my server differently.
You didn't
So
get a core
Axios
server?
did work. For Axios, I didn't even have to pass it no course, but again, I'm running my server on localhost 3000 instead of localhost 8080 because I'm not using Webpack for that server.
Okay.
Interesting. Even GET requests are blocked, huh? I was under the impression that only POST requests would be blocked by the browser. Oh. Okay, so let's do it.
You lost yours.
Oh, working now?
Yeah.
So we can potentially just add a header to a response here. The cross origin request header. So yeah, access allow. Let's look at express response and header. So what we're going to do is we're going to try to add a header to a response, which is the allow cross origin. So that way the browser won't complain about it, and we don't have to make like a no CORS request. We can just make a regular request.
So that goes around it.
What's that?
That goes around it.
Yeah, right. So it says we can say response.set and field and a value. So we're going to say response.set, and the header was called. What's the header called? Allow control or access control allow origin. Yep, this is it. So access hyphen control hyphen allow hyphen origin. We want this to be star.
It doesn't matter if you set it before or after the JSON.
Yeah, I don't think it matters, but we can test it out and see what happens. So doing this, we should now see a response header. Access control allow origin is star. Why that happened? Because we just added this line. This is probably a bad thing to do because essentially now you're saying that anybody can make requests to us. So you may want to limit this to like only the domains that you want. So when you deploy to production, you can just add like, let's say you deploy to like HTTP restaurant picker or something .com. And it'll just allow it for those domains. But we're just cheating for now. Okay, so let's try. Let's go back to our app.js and let's remove this mode no cars because we shouldn't be needing it anymore.
Then do you want to comment out the response.json?
Right. So let's try that. Yay!
So you set that status in the header to allow any domain to make a request to your
Yeah.
server?
Yeah. Which is dangerous.
Sure, but Or like dev. It's
Yeah.
probably.
Cool. So who wants to go to Zachary's Chicago Pizza?
It's my thing.
Did you comment out the response.json or
No, I uncommented it.
are you
Yeah, so that's how we're getting the JSON back. Okay. So what does this data have? So we have, this is just essentially a list of objects and a list of restaurants. 20 of them. So what do we want to do with these 20 restaurants once we...
So restaurants from search,
Mm-hmm.
and it's going to be an array.
Mm-hmm.
Do you want to add the JSON at name to that array?
So you want
If you want name and location because of what you intend to do with it.
Mm-hmm. So we want to say something like, so what we ideally want is we want this array to be replaced by the array we get back from our search.
Oh, you need to set the state.
So we need to set the state. So how do we set state?
set state?
Yeah.
What's that?
Set state?
Okay, but where's that function defined?
Right there.
Is it just a global function?
I don't know. Where is it defined?
I think it's part of
It's part of component, right?
Isn't it?
So how would we get access to it though? Can we just directly call this state set state here? Yeah, so we need to say this dot set state,
Oh, that's what you're asking.
right? Because set state doesn't exist.
Oh, I have a question.
Yeah.
Because I think we only gave it Oakland, right, for the
Mhm.
search.
Yes.
So how did it know to only give back restaurants? I'm trying to find
Oh, I see.
because I don't know, it just seems like it would just give back businesses.
It's, I guess, just how Yelp designs their API.
Like
It's like we figure you're searching for restaurants if
they
you're using
default
Yelp.
or
Yeah.
something.
Hmm.
That's interesting.
So I guess like what was the was there a type?
No, I did a find all in the project to see.
Maybe it's the API that we're using specifically. Search
Yeah.
rest, I don't know. Oh, it says businesses
Yeah, that's
search.
what I was like
Interesting.
curious.
Maybe the businesses are restaurants.
Or business types.
Hmm.
I'm gonna search just on regular Yelp. And see.
Interesting. Okay.
So there you
So it must be like a big API that we're using.
They just know we are hungry. That's why. It's 11 o'clock, stomachs are grumbling. Okay, so we need to set the restaurants from search field, right? We need to set line 25 and replace that with like an actual the results we get back from that search. So
JSON.name and probably location.
So we can just say JSON,
Just give it the whole thing.
the whole thing. Why not? Let's go crazy. Okay, so if that happens, we can look at our React. Oh no. Okay, I'm gonna open a different thing here. Actually, go back here. Oh, dang it. Okay. So okay, so in our React tab, we can kind of look at the state now. So we have a store. Actually, wait, we go to our app. Right, so our app has an array of 20 on our restaurants from search. And each of them is like an actual restaurant. with the name. Does it have a name here? Yeah, name exactly. Chicago Pizza, price, rating, and stuff. Cool.
Mm-hmm.
So
You want to render that.
right. So let's add another file here, and we're going to call it loading.js, and it's going to be a function component, which just means that we're just going to say export default function, and this is just going to take some props, and we're going to return just the JSX. So we're going to just say div loading. Okay. So why are we doing this? Any guesses?
If it's yellow, it'll say it's loading.
If it's what?
If the page takes a while to load, it'll at least alert you that it's loading.
Don't we need your import React from React?
Do we know what?
Your import React from React?
Yes. Thank you. So we don't need component here because we're not creating a component class. We're just creating a function.
Why do we need to import React?
Because
JSX.
the JSX needs React. Okay, so going back to our app, we're going to import loading from loading. Okay. And then here, you're going to say this dot state dot, what is it called? Restaurants from search dot length if it is greater than 0, then we do this, else we return the loading component. Actually, at this point, I'm just going to do an if. I really don't like ternary operators.
So you only have to use a ternary operator if it's inside the return statement.
Say that again.
So I've seen people use if they're trying to do a some kind of logic like actually inside the return statement, they'll use a ternary because you can't use if else.
Mm-hmm.
But if it's inside the render, you can use an if.
Yeah. Okay. So if I refresh my page, I should see a loading and then cool. We're getting fancy over here. Okay, so now we're going to try to like not use this static data here, right? We want to try to give it like a real restaurant. So instead of like passing in a name, rating, location, and cost, I think I'm just going to pass in a restaurant. Or actually, let's convert this. So this would be a little bit more obvious. So let's say let restaurant be this. I'm going to convert this into an object. Right? And then I'm just going to pass in the restaurant. So I essentially flattened out the I sort of grouped the props and made it into a restaurant.
So if the state for restaurants from search has anything in it, you're assigning restaurant this object?
Yeah, I just want to pass. So if you think of it as a function, right? Like a function takes an argument, can take in all the different arguments. Like before we were taking in a name, a rating, a location, and a cost. But those are all properties of a restaurant. So instead of like individually passing it down, I'm just passing it down as like the whole thing, like an object. So that way my function looks nice. It just accepts a restaurant.
Yeah.
And then my function can then decide what to use and what not to use. Because I may pass in like 20 things, but I may only want to use like 3 of them. And that's a decision that my function can make. Does that make sense? Because like, for example, let's say we wanted to even add an address. Then I would have to modify the caller and add an address here. But if I just pass in the whole restaurant, which may contain the address, then it becomes a choice of the component restaurant to use the address or not.
I'm confused that it looks like the restaurant is still hard-coded. Is that intentional?
It is.
Okay, that was.
Yeah. Okay, got it. Yeah, I'm just doing one step at a time.
I was thinking that the operator should be flipped the other way.
Got it. Yeah, it's still hard-coded because I didn't want to change too much.
Okay.
So we're hard-coding this, and now we have to change our restaurant component to, so you know how it was name, rating, location, cost, and we're doing this.props, this becomes this.props.restaurant, and it still remains the same. Because now it's like nested inside of the restaurant, those properties. So if we refresh our page, things should still work. Cool. So that's like a sanity check that things are still working. A good sanity check would be like writing tests, but we're not there yet. Okay, so going back to our app, now we can try to get our restaurant from our state. So we can say restaurants from search of 0. Let's always give the 0 to the restaurant in the beginning. Okay. So now, okay, so let's see if that works. May not work. Yeah, we're getting something. Restaurants from search is not defined. Oh, this is this.state. Because restaurants at search does not exist. We only have state. Objects are not valid. So we got, I see. So we have a restaurant.restaurant.
Where do you see that? The restaurant.
So I was logging this.props inside of my restaurant component. And that's what this.props is. This is what is being sent to the restaurant component. And that is an object which has a field called restaurant. So instead, what we may want to pass is of 0.restaurant. Did that make sense? So we want to like get the values of like, the name and stuff, and that's inside of this object called restaurant. So what we're doing is we are sort of getting that object out of there. Because inside of my restaurant, I only want the restaurant properties. I don't want like this wrapper object which has a key called restaurant. So let's try that. Cannot read name of undefined. Okay, cool. So maybe like now we have to change this restaurant here. Oh, my bad. Wait. That doesn't make sense. Going back here, let's log restaurant. So I'm going to log restaurant, see what we get. So restaurant is undefined. Interesting. So this is not a restaurant here. Restaurant is this thing. Okay, my bad. Oh, right, because this is this.props. Never mind. I was just having a brain freeze. So we don't need to do a .restaurant here because we're doing that inside of our restaurant. We're doing this.props.restaurant. I forgot that we were just logging this.props here. That we were logging this.props.restaurant. Okay, so objects are not valid as a React child. Oh, can we not pass down object as a prop in React?
We were just doing it though when you had the manually constructed object.
Oh, that's right. How many properties does it have? Oh, I see. It's like a nested object. It has like transactions, has coordinates. I wonder if. So let me undo this. And then let's just add some nested stuff in here. So let's say coordinates. You don't have to do this. I'm just testing this out to debug to see if this still works. Okay, that still works. Or if it's an array of stuff. So why is it not liking this dot state dot from search of 0? Objects are not valid.
It's because when it's doing location is like an object with multiple things. So when we're trying to render location in restaurant as a string, it's yelling that you're trying to render.
Oh, I see. Got it.
Mm.
So that's like in here.
Yeah. So like
Got it.
that location
Okay.
is a whole object, not just one thing.
Cool. Okay.
Where'd you take that up from, that location?
This was in the restaurant component.
So that was being read as an object?
Yeah, so location is an object,
Mm-hmm.
and we cannot like just render this as a string. It's trying to render this as a string, but it's an object. So what we want is like we want to get inside of the location.
Something.
Yeah, so location dot address 1.
And if you change a cost to price, then move the dollar sign as well.
Cost to price. Oh yeah, okay. So that's $2. Cool. So that still works. Is it? So where's everyone at? So we did a bunch of things. So let's go back in here. Let's delete this. We don't need it anymore. So we're directly passing in the 0th restaurant from our search. If there is something that's more than, if you have some restaurants. And then otherwise we just like show the loading component. We had to require a loading component here to make it work. And then our restaurant component, we are now passing a restaurant as a prop. So we had to get our values from that. And we're getting name, rating, location, and price. And now location is an object, so we need to put in the location.city in there.
And we had to change price because that's what would give us actual dollars.
Yeah, so if we wanted the $2 stuff, like how expensive the restaurant is, and that apparently is under the price thing here. See it?
Yeah.
Cool. Is everyone here? Yeah.
I have an error, but I must have made a mistake somewhere, but I just can't find, the thing is saying I cannot find module dot components slash components slash app. And it's it's my index file that's looking for it, and it worked before, and now suddenly it's not finding it.
If you look into your console, you probably have an error, which is why it's not compiling.
Yeah.
What is the error? Not in the console of your browser, the console of your terminal window.
Oh, there's no error in that.
It says it's a valid bundle?
Yeah.
Hmm.
It's getting the fetch and everything. Cool.
This is your backend, but what about your front end? Right here. No, but like where is the front end server running? You know how you have to start your front end server? Your front end command?
Right. Oh, right here. Thank you. Okay.
Yeah, because there's like 2 terminals now, so there's like there's 3 possibilities where errors could happen. Like where you have to look at, which is like your backend server logs, your front end server logs, and the browser console. So. Yeah, usually I just like the terminal as part of the atom is terrible because it's just like it's so small and you already are like short of space, like looking at your source code and like having another like small tiny window for your terminal. It's like not a very good experience in terms of like debugging and stuff. Ideally, this is like way better, like having like a split thing on your thing. Like,
can you show me the app.js?
App.js.
Where it was hard-coded restaurant.
Yeah.
Okay, you took that out completely. Okay, I missed all that.
I mean, you can keep it too if you want to. You have a restaurant here, like this.
Yeah.
Mine never does anything other than the loading component.
Did you check the console logs?
Yeah, there were no errors, and I just logged like this .state.restaurants from search.length, and like it returned 0 and then undefined.
Okay, so one thing to do is to see your React tab and to see what your restaurant from search has.
It has the array of.
And then in your thing, you're checking the length to be greater than 0?
Yep. And then when I logged it in the render and in the browser console, it like printed 0 and then undefined. So that's why loading is. But in the React tab, it shows them in the state. I don't know.
Okay. So are you sure you're doing this start set state? I guess you are, because you're saying the React tab has this.
Yeah,
It's like
it looks-
exactly the same.
Yeah.
So weird. Yeah, so this is all the same. Setting the start state. And then same here. But it never like rendered this, it just stayed in loading. So I like console it here. And so like when I refresh, it'll do 0, undefined. And then yeah, React it'll just show like
What is the state like again? Like it had in the React tab. It has like restaurants from search, which is an array of 20 or.
Oh, it has a data in there.
Oh.
So it's an object.
That's what I
it's an
saw.
object.
So it's coming in as an object.
So go back to your index here. There should be results.data. And I think dot something else. Go ahead. Okay. That works?
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's results.data here. So some of you may have in your backend API results, but we're sending back results.data. But yeah, going back here. Okay, so how's everyone doing?
Getting a different error
What's the error?
now. In the browser console, warning React.create element type should not be null. Undefined Boolean or number should be string. DOM elements or a React class for composite elements.
Yeah, so if you go to your restaurant component, change your location to be location.city.
Oh, I just got rid of the location.
Oh, you got rid of it? Okay, that's fine. Okay, let me come to you.
Maybe you're missing a return statement somewhere. That sounds like a familiar bug I've gotten where I forgot to put return.
Return state. Go back here. Go to your React app. App itself is not mounting.
I've exported it.
One second. Okay. Scroll all the way down. Your index bar. Okay, let's look at the error again. Can you scroll up to the error? regular method of app. Undefined.
And we click this.
Element type is invalid. Expected a string. So let's go to like the React app. And what is in loading? What is loading?
But I'm using PS6.
Go back to that.
But yeah, that should be. I see.
Then you're requiring loading correctly.
Maybe you have a picture.
No, it's just loading. It's not required. It's not an object
Function.
because you're exporting default.
That closes. Yeah, you don't need the third.
All right, thank you.
Cool.
Oh, no, you can.
Okay, so now that we have this, notice that we are sort of. Sabrina, how are you doing?
I'm good. He just pointed out what I was missing.
Okay, that's working?
Yeah.
Cool. Okay, so finally now we can like show the first restaurant, and now we need like some more functionality of our app, right? Like which is essentially we need to have some buttons in here, and every time I click on reject, it should show me the next restaurant, and every time if I click OK, then it should somehow take me to like more details about this restaurant. So let's take this scenario where I want to implement rejects, right? When I want to keep saying X, when I click on the X buttons, I need to be shown the next restaurant. So remember we thought that we would keep what our current restaurant is. And then we have this thing of like, what were the restaurants that you rejected? What were the restaurants that you accepted? But for the flow where we want to like keep track of which restaurant we are at, we probably just need to maintain some sort of an index at a position where we are at. So if you're at the first restaurant, we show that one. And if the user rejects that restaurant, we sort of move that counter along to the next one. We keep doing that until we reach the end. When we reach the end, we're like, okay, sorry, we don't have any more restaurants for you. So let's start with that approach, which is like as I keep pressing the X button, I keep sort of incrementing my counter that will show me the next restaurant. And if I press X again, that will increment the counter again, and I will show the next restaurant.
And as restaurants open up in the city, whatever, they just add that to their database. That's what happens.
We don't have a database at this point.
No, I'm just thinking like Yelp. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, right. Yeah. So that's up to Yelp. We're giving them the responsibility of finding restaurants for us, and we are just sort of managing what the user has seen and what they haven't seen and what they have rejected and what they're going to accept. That's the responsibility of our app. So we are only like looking at the flow where a user is rejecting a restaurant. So we have a list of 10 restaurants. We start from the first one, and we keep going down that list of restaurants until we reach the end. And when we reach the end, we don't know what to do at the point, but that's what we're implementing now. So notice that we were getting the 0th restaurant in the beginning. So instead of getting the 0th restaurant, we want to get like the current index restaurant. So we need some way of saying this .state.current restaurant index. I'm making this up. This doesn't exist, but we want to do something like this. And the initial value of this would be 0, and then we would keep incrementing this as the user keeps doing things. So what we could do is now that we've added this new property on our state, we would just add that to our state. And we would say it's 0. So that our functionality just works. Because that was what the old value was, if you remember, right? This was 0. So that would mean that this needs to be 0 in the beginning when I load my app.
Mm-hmm.
Questions about that? Does that approach make sense? That we have a counter and we keep going down our list of restaurants as our counter keeps increasing. And the counter increases when the user presses the reject button.
So Is there a reason then we're still keeping current restaurant?
Yeah, we probably don't need it.
Yeah.
Yeah, so
Unless later we're just going to say restaurant is current restaurant and set the state of current restaurant to be this.
right, or we can just look up the restaurant by the index, right? So now that we know that which indexed restaurant the user is currently looking at, we can just like fetch that from the list of restaurants. So restaurants from search of current restaurant index would give me the restaurant the user is currently looking at. Okay, so let's add, okay, so like now that we've changed this to use this current index, let's see if things continue to work the same way. Cool, they still work. I'm still getting back Zachary's Chicago visa. So now imagine that, a user clicks on the reject button and then this increases to 1. And if I refresh my page, it should get to the next restaurant. Right, so that's homeroom. So that would keep happening. I would change this to 2, and then the user would see the next thing. Right, so you keep seeing the next thing. So we need a way to, so on restaurant, reject.
We're just going to.
So I'm just creating a function which needs to do something.
To increase add 1 to the current restaurant index. Is that what you do?
Mm-hmm. So how would we do that?
We'd have to define like what rejections look like, but like if user reject, set state, this.set state.
So what would be the new state?
Current restaurant index plus equals 1.
So we shouldn't. In React, we're never directly manipulating the state. We're always giving back the new state.
Create a new object itself.
Right. So this is the new object, and we can, since we're only changing like one value in the massive state, we can just like provide the def, which is like the field that we're changing, the key that we're changing, and the new value. So what would be the new value of our current index? But we want to make it generic.
Oh.
So how did you come up with 1 if it was 0? What would be the new value if it is 3? So increment what?
1.
Increment by 1, but what do we increment?
Current restaurant.
Right, so we increment the old value by 1. And how do we get the old value?
This state current restaurant index.
Exactly. So this dot state dot current restaurant index.
We weren't sure if we could say that because we were like, we don't want to manipulate the.
So this is only reading it.
Yeah.
So
this is only reading it.
So this is just reading it and building a new value.
Right.
This is still a value. This returns like 3 or 4 or whatever the value is, and then you're creating this new object here. And React is smart enough to figure out that if it's only like one value in there, it means that you're performing a diff. So this is like the how like in HTTP there is like a HTTP method called put, which allows you to update something, but there's an HTTP method called patch. Have you ever used it?
I haven't.
Okay, so patch essentially just allows you to like change only the field that you're updating. So let's say I'm only updating my first name. I'm not really updating my last name. Then I can only say first name is this new thing. And it's smart enough to know that, oh, you're only updating the first name. So it'll only update that specific column in your database. So this is the same thing where you're just providing just the field that you're updating, and smart enough to know that, oh, this is the only thing that you want to change. Everything else remains the same. Okay, so if this happens,
Should we also push the restaurant into rejected restaurants?
we shall think about that later. One step at a time. So right now we just want to move along. We haven't come to the point where, oh, we don't want to see the old restaurant again. So, so what do we do with this function? We have created this function. When does this function get evaluated?
When a user rejects.
So that like on clicking a button,
Yeah.
right? So we need to create two buttons now.
Unclick.
So we have this component called restaurant select buttons, beautifully created for us. So we just have to modify this now. So here we need now two buttons. We need, I guess let's just start with one. We just reject for now. So button. Cool. So this is a reject button, right? So now if I refresh my page, I will see a reject. But if I click on it, nothing's happening.
Right. We
Why?
have to create an unclick.
So we need to create an on-click. And then what would this be? What would the function be?
It would be well, does it have to get the function? First of all, does it have to get that function that we just created as a prop?
Mm-hmm.
So we need to pass a prop down to restaurant select buttons.
So why does it need to get it as a prop?
Because it's that function is defined on the app, the parent app.
Exactly. So the relationship between the restaurant select buttons component and the app component is a parent-child relationship.
Right.
Like app is the parent of this component. And the only way I can pass things down from the parent to a child is via props.
Right.
So this function is defined on app, and I want to pass it down to my restaurant select buttons. So how would I pass it down?
I think you just create a space and give it the prop, which is the name of the function.
So I would say on button click, and then this would be this start. What is it? On restaurant reject.
And then
And let's call this on reject click.
and so
Let's just call it on restaurant reject.
on restaurant reject. So when we go back into the child component for the button, do we give it the name of the prop?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
This start prop start.
On restaurant reject, is that what it's called?
Mm-hmm.
And then do we need to either bind it in app or pass it up through an arrow function in app?
Mm-hmm. So where do we need to bind it?
Here, I think, right? Or no.
In app.
Wasn't the prop called on reject? Like,
No, I changed it on restaurant reject.
On restaurant reject. So since I'm guessing, since the function is defined in the parent app, do we bind this
Mm-hmm.
in the parent?
Yes, it's always bound in the parent. So it's always bound in the place where it's defined.
Okay.
So this start on restaurant reject equal to this start on restaurant reject dot bind this.
Now, why didn't you bind it down where you?
So you bind it in the constructor,
Uh-huh.
and then we just pass it down. Once it's bound, you can just pass it down.
Okay.
Right here, we just pass it down.
Okay.
Okay, so
Yay.
Ensaro! That's the last one.
I just ordered from yesterday.
We cannot reject
It's
this.
very expensive though for
Yeah.
delivery.
Oh yeah, I've never ordered in from Ensaro. Always went to the restaurant.
I went, it's through Caviar that I ordered, and I sent it to the wrong address yesterday. So terrible. Yeah,
Okay, cool. So it's working.
big ones.
Nice.
I
Can
eat it
you
all.
go
I
back
would
to
never
the
check it.
app.js, please?
Which part?
Now scroll down to the render part,
Mm-hmm.
right there.
Is the beautiful restaurant picker working for everybody? Yeah. Okay, so let's do another piece of functionality, which is when you accept. So going back to our restaurant select buttons, we need another button here, we're going to call it on click this.props.on restaurant. This time we will say accept.
After a user accepts a restaurant, what do you want it to do?
We wanted to go to like a different screen where it says, "Yeah, this is this restaurant. These are some additional details about the restaurant. This is the address," because we're not showing all of those things in the smaller
Right.
screen.
Okay.
Like here are the number of reviews. I don't know.
Right. Just
Some-
give it all the details that we have in there.
Exactly. Okay, so on restaurant reject, accept would be another function. And then we would want to do the same thing here about binding it. So this.on restaurant accept equal to this.on restaurant accept.bind this. And for now, let's just say we don't know what we want to do. So let's just console.log accepted the restaurant. So we literally did the same thing. So we created a new restaurant. We bound the restaurant using the bind operator, and then we just passed the restaurant down. But we haven't done it so far, so we need to do that. So we need to say on restaurant accept. Yeah. Okay, and then refresh our page. Cool. So we get some log saying we accepted the restaurant. When we reject, we continue to do stuff. Accept, reject, accept, reject. Okay, great. So we actually want the accept to do something useful rather than just log it.
So like a render another prop, right?
Mhm.
Or a component.
Right. So let's create a new component called restaurant winner, maybe.
Yeah.
Restaurant. Do you have an idea? What did you want to call it?
Just more detail.
Restaurant detail? Like that?
Yeah.
Okay. So we're going to say import React, oops, not, and component from React, and then export default.
Do you know off the top of your head that we're going to utilize component?
Yes.
Are we going to be passing props or not passing props, but like how?
Actually, this could be
Like
a presentational component. You're right.
Yeah.
So we can just say export default function. So just props. So we don't need component.
I was just wondering, like, how you like, knew.
I don't know. It was just like muscle memory. I wasn't thinking.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So export default props, and then we just want to return some stuff.
Can you explain really quick the presentation component again?
So in components where you don't have any
State, right?
state,
Okay.
or you're not initialized. Yeah, I guess mostly state, where you're not like using any of the React API, like component did mount or component will receive mount. You're only creating a render function instead of like having the boilerplate code for like the class and like render function. You just like directly write a function, and that automatically is the render function. So here, maybe we want to say div. Yeah, you are going to have a fabulous meal. At some place. So here would be props.restaurant name. Put it in a span. And then maybe some details like address, would be
Do you know what it's called? What's the restaurant address mean? Or
right.
location, right? Because location was a whole object.
Right. So let's actually do a const location name this dot. Oh, actually, it's not this here. Props dot restaurant. I think it's location dot address 1, location dot address 2, location dot city. Okay, let's just start with this.
Can we destructure location on line 4?
Like nested destructuring?
I mean, like, are we allowed to destructure
Oh yeah,
an object sitting on an object like that?
totally.
Okay.
So you can say address 1, comma address 2.
Okay, is equal to like.
Yeah, is it
location.
no, it's just equal to location
Oh, okay.
because you've already
Alright,
destructured
we already
that out.
have it.
But in some languages you can even do nested destructuring. So you can potentially do address 1 and address 2. I'm not sure if JavaScript allows you to do this.
Is it closure?
Yeah. Like Clojure, Haskell, like some of the functional programming languages allow you to do that. Okay, so let's see. Let's now import restaurant detail from restaurant underscore detail. And then here we're going to say so you're going to say, oops, this dot state dot
Rejected restaurant.
accepted restaurant is
Oh, accepted. Yeah, that's right.
dot length rather than 0. Then we want to like, I guess we would only accept a restaurant once, right?
Yeah.
So we don't want to keep this as an array. We would just want this to be an object. So you just say if that
Why don't you set it to 0 instead? Why don't you set this dot the state of accepted restaurants to 0? The same way.
Oh, so like the index, you mean?
Oh, right.
So we want to keep track of the either the whole restaurant that we have selected or the index of the restaurant we've selected. Right? Actually, maybe we should do the index. So accepted restaurant index is -1 in the beginning, which indicates that we haven't selected one yet. And the moment we select one, it would be a positive. It would be either a 0 or a positive number. So we can say if. So our condition could be if accepted restaurant index is greater than equal to 0, then we render restaurant detail with restaurant equal to this dot state dot. Actually, let's just also say const restaurants from search, comma current restaurant index, comma accepted restaurant index equal to this dot state. Just destructuring it, so it's
So we don't have to use this dot state every single time.
yeah. And then here, this would just be restaurants from search. And what would be the index?
Search.
So which one are we picking?
Accepted restaurant.
Right. So accepted
I
restaurant index. That would be the index of the restaurant we selected. Does that make sense? So we're checking to see if you've accepted a restaurant, and that condition is essentially if accepted restaurant index is greater than or equal to 0. If it is, then we show the restaurant detail page. Otherwise, we check if the length is 0. That means we haven't selected a restaurant yet.
Let's see.
So, yay, error. Restaurant detail is not defined.
Is it exported? Export default.
What is the error? Cannot find module restaurant detail. Did I spell it weird?
Oh, did you put two? Oh wait.
Taurant. Taurant. Hmm. Oh, I see. It's a bug. It doesn't allow me the nested destructuring thing.
Yeah.
I mean, not a bug, but like a typo thingy. Okay, so I have to do it on the next line.
And then you can just use address one. Yeah.
Oh, I'm in city, so. Cool. Reject. Respond yes. Oh, it's still console logging. We did all of that, but we didn't really change our.
We didn't render anything.
We didn't change our function, which changes the state. So what do we need to do here?
Oh. Change the state of the set state. Set state.
To what? And what do we change? So what?
When I see it again, it's at -1, right? Except your restaurant.
So let's say we are at current index 5 and we hit on accept. Let's say this is our state right now, right? Like this has a bunch of restaurants in here, like an array of restaurants. But we're at 5 and I
We
hit.
want to accept it.
What does that mean? What do we want to change? What do we want?
We want to change. We want to accepted restaurant index. Don't we want the index to equal the index that we're on when we're accepting it?
Right.
So we can either like hard set it that like, so we create a new object, right? And it's this dot state of accept restaurant index, accepted restaurant index, right?
So the field would be so this is the new value, right? So the new state would just have the field accepted current. That's what you want to change.
Yeah.
And what would the value be?
Current restaurant.
Right. This dot state dot current restaurant index. Right.
That
Whatever
makes sense.
whatever we are at
We
now.
want it to equal whatever one we accept, the one we're on.
Exactly.
Right.
Then the initial value is 0.
So we don't have to say that. Oh, I see. Never mind. Got it.
So all you're doing is updating the new state, and React takes care of like re-rendering. We only have to think about like when an action happens, what is the new state?
No, I was just trying to figure out the syntax.
Okay. Oh, you mean like with the object assigned stuff we were talking about?
No,
yesterday?
just what how set state works. We
Got
give
it.
And we give it a new object.
Yeah,
and
like
then
why we didn't do like
this dot state dot
for,
yeah.
like, the key
Yeah.
for the value.
Right, because the key is the key.
Right.
Whereas this is literally a string. You're saying that this is the string, but then you want to access the value, the previous value of our state, and that you would get by saying this dot state.
Right.
Cool. Okay, so we reject homeroom, and a valid component must be returned. You have returned undefined. And dot render. Huh.
You don't need a render. You don't need to render inside of our presentational app, right? Our presentational component, right?
Right. No. So the fact that it's a function means that it's the render function. Just like in loading here. So it's not liking our Restaurant detail component.
Oh, is it because you changed the state to 0, but your statement is greater than or equal to 0 in your render? So when you first load the page, it doesn't have the information that you need.
No, but the accepted restaurant index is -1.
No, it is -1.
Yeah.
Sorry.
No worries. So
Are we?
let's look at our state. Huh. Our accepted restaurant index was -1. So our accept function isn't working. Rendering app. So let's see. So we re-render app, we call accept, it re-renders app. Okay, so it's entering that for sure. But it looks like it's not.
Mine's working, but it's not throwing errors or rendering.
Oh, really?
It's changing this accepted restaurant index.
It's changing it, but it's
Yeah,
not.
but nothing shows up in the console or renders.
Got it. So if you go to a restaurant detail page, can you console log your props here?
Can you console log the indexes? As we're
The indexes?
Yeah.
Which ones?
Of the restaurant of the restaurants as we're going through them. So like.
So let's console log the start state. So I would have like the whole thing.
But I don't want to do the through state. I don't know what I'm trying to say. Like, I want to see, like, I'm like, okay, so this is an array of objects, right? Essentially.
Yeah. You mean the restaurants from search is an array of objects? Yeah.
Right.
What about it?
So as we're saying, as we're rejecting the restaurants, it's just looping that through that array of objects, right? I'm trying to understand.
Yeah. So we're just incrementing a counter that's keeping track of where we're at. And as the user clicks on stuff, we're just incrementing the counter.
Oh,
and every time the counter increments, the state is being changed.
Okay.
And when the state changes, it causes a re-render, which automatically picks the right restaurant from the list of restaurants.
Okay.
Hey. Hey, Jonathan.
Yeah, it didn't log.
Okay, so let's see what's going on. So reject works, and that is changing our state. Right, so every time we reject something, it changes our state. And then accept.
And we have an on-click on function on accept, right?
We have an on-click function? Yeah, we do. We have an on-click function here. Oh, sorry. Inside of our restaurant select buttons. On reject and on accept.
And then can we look at the actual function? Like, is this?
Look at the function?
Yeah, is it being called?
Yeah, it is being called because I. Okay, let's log it here. Calling on restaurant accept. So calling on restaurant accept. So it re-rendered the app. Okay, so this is our new state. So it re-rendered the app. The accepted restaurant index was 0. It changed it from from -1 to 0. So that means it would have entered this if condition, and it's trying to render this one. But this apparently is failing for whatever reason. Maybe I am having, this isn't good. Okay, I think we're reaching the end of time, so let's like debug this offline. And let's continue next week. Do we have a workshop now?
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
Anthony, you want to tell them what's that happened?
Yes. Tech landscape. You have the whole schedule